So before I get in with an introduction, how many people know who Kirk is? Okay. So maybe you gave me a long introduction, but instead of me introducing you,
Yeah.
and I'll start off saying, look, you're a successful entrepreneur, started a company called Wave, which had a $500 million exit, got to $100 million revenue before you left, and you're now back in the ring. But just how would you introduce yourself other than that? Give me a 30-second introduction of your background.
Someone who's gotten really lucky by surrounding themselves with great people in the tech ecosystem, a number of whom are here tonight, which makes me super, super happy. And it's all about who you surround yourself with and how you come together as a team to create amazing outcomes. And we had one of those, and it was an amazing 10-year, 12-year run.
Yeah, well, I think it's like, at the time, it was the seventh biggest exit for this ecosystem. And I'm hoping that you get beat with that quite often with much bigger exits. But I think, I feel very lucky to have you on stage now, because shortly after that exit, we did another fireside, and you were pretty open about the ups and downs and why to sell. And you're one of the people I feel comfortable that is pretty transparent about the journeys of being a founder, because everyone gets the Facebook movie where it's all up and to the right. Before we get into that journey bit and what you're doing now, I'd love to know a bit more about your background, how you started off. You started off doing digital media at the start of your career. So how'd you get into that, and why start there?
So I dropped out of university a couple times and really found that the only way that I knew how to learn and try things was to start companies and give them a try. I happened to be surrounded by a bunch of people who were really into adventure sports. And so it was 1999 at the time. And so we started out a digital webcasting business around adventure sports. And like you would assume during the dot-com crash, we went bankrupt and had not a lot of good ideas about how to make the business itself work, but really had an amazing time playing with technology, trying to do innovative things in that space, and learned a lot of hard lessons about kind of what not to do and what doesn't work.
So that's an easy setup. What did you learn about what not to do and what would work?
Well, you need a revenue model, which can be helpful. Although with Wave, we started free and took us a while to get to a revenue model, so I clearly didn't learn that fast enough. But the biggest thing that I learned about myself was that I had to get a lot better. I needed to build up my network and my skill sets. At the time, I was super young and didn't have a lot of people that I could call on for advice or help or people to learn from. So that's really what I spent the next sort of 7 to 10 years of my career doing, was working, in fact, in digital media, meeting a lot of great people, testing out hypotheses on other people's dimes. And that really led to starting Wave in 2009.
So a bit more about that. How did you go about meeting the right people? Because it's very easy to say that, you can go join, I'm sure there's a bunch of startups hiring here, there's a bunch of corporates. How did you know which companies to go to? How did you know who to talk to? How did you find the right people to learn from?
Well, I think to your point, there's a lot of amazing companies in Toronto and Canada that one could go work at. And through the process, I believe a whole bunch of people that worked at Wave met a lot of other amazing people, number one. Number two, saw the things that we did right and saw a whole bunch of things that we did wrong. And I think the smart people who are paying attention and asking for meetings with people so that they can learn from them, asking for people to be mentors for them, really being curious, can learn a lot through that process, both what to do and, just as importantly, some of the mistakes that one makes along that journey.
So it sounds like the key thing is to actually learn. It's not as much, you can position, it doesn't matter, well, to a certain extent, it doesn't matter where you're at as long as you have the opportunity to learn from your experience.
For sure. And, one of the most formative experiences that I had was working at a big company, and I talked about it last time we were together, at Quebec Or. And quite frankly, if I'm honest, I learned all the shit that I never, ever wanted the business to be.
So, and what was that?
Well, it just the level of politics, the level of difficulty to drive innovation. You can witness it firsthand and realize like that's the kind of culture that happens when people aren't incentivized or feel motivated to want to drive change. And when that starts to seep into an organization, it's really, really damaging because it starts slow and it picks up pace.
Yeah, so avoid politics, get the right incentives. I just want to actually take one more step back because you mentioned that you dropped out of university once or twice. And if I've, some other podcasts or readings of you, you mentioned that was one of the most formative and most important things you did. And I think that's counterintuitive to probably a lot of people in this room. So I'd just like to expand a bit on that. So why was that helpful or good for you?
I don't know that it was helpful or good for me. I think it left me with a serious sense of inferiority that I needed to try and work hard to overcome.
So motivation, chip on the shoulder. Now let's just jump a bit forward to Wave. Last time we talked, I think it was recently after you sold, and I have a couple questions about that, stuff that happened. Generally, what was the most surprising aspect about growing Wave now that you've had a few years to think about, from a good or bad? What didn't you expect about the scaling that business?
So sorry, what did I expect through the process?
What did you learn about scaling Wave?
It sort of comes back to what I mentioned before, which was it's such a cliche, but it really, really is all about the people. We went through many different phases at Wave of having different teams. And I just think when you look back on it, I think we were really lucky and fortunate and very prescriptive about trying to find the right people at the right time to help us take the next stage. And there were a lot of difficult conversations that happened through that process where two things, and maybe some founders in the room will relate to this, there's two really difficult things about scaling the team and making changes where you think you need to take the next step and you're not sure you have the team to do it. There are two real difficulties that I faced through that process. The number one was looking in the mirror and saying, who am I to make the judgment call on somebody when I've made a ton of mistakes along the way and I'm not sure I'm the right person that can take this business to the next step, and trying to overcome that and have confidence, about your leadership and making those hard decisions, number one. And then number two, having conversations with folks and seeing that they've given so much of themselves to the Wave journey along the way, but realizing that you don't think they're the right person to take you to the next step. Like, heartbreaking. But crucially important. So that was probably the most difficult and the most important component of it.
Yeah, those tough conversations, I guess, never get easier.
No.
And, you got to that exit, and then after we talked to you, you stayed another 3 years at Wave, and you got up to 100 million in revenue. What was different, and what did you learn from being part of a large organization that I think you were still relatively independent, but H&R Block, big organization. So from that 3-year period, what were the takeaways from working with a big organization?
Yeah, so I think we were, to your point, we were in a bit of a unique situation in that Jeff and the team there, for the most part, left us alone to do our thing and was very supportive through the process. So that's very different than a lot of acquisitions. So we got really, really lucky through that process. But I think one of the things that the exec team needed to sort of reorient ourselves around was we suddenly had a very different dynamic in terms of retaining people and attracting new folks to the journey. And what I mean by that is, when you're a startup, there's certain incentives that are put in place in terms of equity ownership. There's a we're going to be the rocket ship, type approach. And then suddenly you get acquired, everyone's really, really excited about it, and then it's kind of like, okay, well, Now we've got to change compensation structures. Do we still give out equity, but that doesn't match what the acquiring company does? We still want to retain these people, but is there as much of a sense of excitement? Are we going to attract the same type of people? We had to completely change the entire, both recruiting and retention playbook, which was, I think, something we found along the way, but that was a bit of a surprise. The other thing was I specifically tried to really sell the message, which I genuinely felt, it wasn't a fake sales pitch, but that we had control over our own destiny, and we were going to go and drive something, continued to be big and innovative in the marketplace. And actually what the team wanted to hear from us was, what are the combined entities going to create that's different than what we could have on our own? And so there was a bit of a mismatch between what they wanted to hear and what I was feeling was, the empowerment moving forward. So I think aligning those messages was really, really important. And then the final thing I'll say is just, like, if we're honest and candid, incentives are put in place for me and senior team members, et cetera, that are oftentimes time-based. And that really, really kind of fucks with your head. Because suddenly you're not going into work every day because you absolutely want to drive performance and drive outcomes and be around people. You're partly going because you're watching the clock and there's a certain timeline involved. And that's not a lot of fun. And so I think the more that we can get acquiring companies to structure things in a way that isn't necessarily time-based, it leads to sort of perverse incentives.
Yeah, so, I guess that's the same, what's that, rest, invest? Yes. Yeah, so you're saying get away from incentives that lead to that. Correct.
And I think all of us were not wired to rest, invest, but you're incentivized to, for time investing. And so it's a challenging dynamic.
Interesting. I want to get into your new business in a second, but before that, after you sold, you still had a commitment to your acquirer, but you made time to get involved in the ecosystem. You started mentoring, you started investing, you became really active. You were active before, but I think you stepped it up. Why do it? Well,
because I had capital.
Well, yeah, but did you have time?
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of us in the ecosystem really feel, and like tonight's event is a perfect example of it, where the ecosystem has been incredible to me. And so there's a real desire to, do as much as you can back. And, my co-founder, Peter, is a former VC, and so I really relied on a lot of his knowledge about investing. And I think it's been really, actually, now that I think about it, it's the most interesting thing about it has been being an investor in a whole bunch of VC funds and watching the other side, i.e. the VCs who had been putting pressure on me, to drive results, now being on the other side of seeing how they operate, how they communicate to their investors, et cetera, has been a real eye-opener. And it's helpful to see that other side to understand what the dynamics are, et cetera.
Yeah, so maybe offline I'll ask you what it's like to be an LP. But when you decide to directly invest, I think more importantly than your money, you're giving your time. So how do you decide imagine anyone here would take a check from you. So how do you decide who to invest in?
So I think the first thing I did was invested in about 12 companies. And then I really wanted to pause for a period just to learn and understand, of those 12, what did I do well and what did I do poorly? What did I get right? What did I get wrong? But I think at the end of the day, and Paul, who's sitting here, is Wave's former COO, so he'll know this about me. I'm not a very good analytical person. I'm much more instinctual. And so I think for me, it was all around founder and company and market. And it was very intuitive in that I really want to see a founder who, for me, this is just my opinion, it does two things. Number one, really has a competitive desire to win and a high threshold for pain. And, kind of together. And then the second is that they're a good storyteller. And not necessarily in the classic, like, no one would accuse Mark Zuckerberg of being a good storyteller. But at the end of the day, if you look at the history, he did tell a story very compellingly of what the future could look like, what social would look like, all of this kind of stuff. And that attracted the best and brightest to the company. So I think a good storyteller, in not necessarily the classic sense, helps attract talent, helps attract capital, and helps attract customers.
Interesting. So good storyteller, a bit of a chip on her shoulder, and the ability to get hit in the face every day.
Yeah, I didn't describe it that way, but okay, we'll go with that.
Yeah. That's what I heard. I'm synthesizing it. One more question before we get to Key. You started Wave. It was not the most robust time in the ecosystem for financing, for money. There was a bit of, Canada seems to get really down on the ecosystem when things aren't going well. I think we're back on those times. As someone that's looking at starting a company or someone that's just starting a company, what advice do you have for them?
Grit it out, I think, is really, to your point, the early stage. Until Peter, who was at Omer's Ventures at the time, wrote us our $500,000 seed check, I probably did, 150 pitches to anyone who would listen to try and attract, at that time, probably $900,000. So, but the other thing that I talk to a lot of founders who say they really hate the idea of pitching, and I actually feel very much the opposite, because I think pitching actually makes you refine your message. If you're talking to smart people, by the way, in 2009, I was talking to a lot of dumb people, honestly, about investing, which was frustrating as hell. But now I think you can get to, you might not get to people who say yes, but you get to more educated people about startups. But the more people you can spend time with who are pushing back on some of your ideas and your thoughts, the more you can refine them, get better. That then helps your positioning on your website, talking to customers. Like there's a lot of real gold that comes out of that process. So I think just keep grinding, because you never know when you get to yes.
Now let's get on to your new grind. Hopefully not as much of a grind as the last one. You announced, shortly after you left, it was announced that you started a company called Key. So why did you get back in the ring? You had that 7th biggest exit in Canada. You had a bit of money. You did the time with the choir. So you're now back to a grind. Why do it?
I think that, so Peter and I started talking about different ideas. And I think this space spoke to me in a way that actually got me interested again. I actually never thought I was going to start something again. So that was one thing, is just the idea and the space and the opportunity to work with Peter. And then the second was, I felt like I talk a lot about the mistakes that we made at Wave, and that this was an opportunity to see if I could correct them and do better and learn from those mistakes, or whether or not I was wrong in the assumptions of the mistakes I made.
Interesting. It's a good chance to see if what lessons actually apply. So now let's get on, can you explain to me what Key is? Because I think when it was launched, the media described it, I wrote it down here, what to describe that as? I think a Web3 digital identity. It sounded very buzzworthy.
Yeah, we like that. It raised us $8.5 million. As many buzzwords as possible in the pitch deck.
Yeah, it was good you didn't have AI because it would have been too early for it. But
too early.
But I read it, and I think you're more someone of substance.
Not when you're raising money. After you get the money.
Don't give away all the secrets. But so can you describe what Key is? I think maybe you have a slide that describes it. Give us the current definition, or what, pitch to us.
Right. So I could tell you that today, and the team will back me up on this. Sam and Preet, Sam's our head of product and Preet's our head of design. You'll see some of their work. I'm nervous today because I hate being on stage when I don't really feel like I've got it crisp. And we're still working on the crispness.
Kirk, no one would have known that. You don't have to give away the secret.
Yeah,
Everyone
no. But
assumes it's crisp.
The Candid is the way to go, right? So anyways, we raise money on the idea of decentralized technology, which at its core means our goal is to give you back control of your identity online, because there's a lot of issues in the marketplace right now around everybody's got your identity in their system. You don't have control over it. There's all sorts of platforms that are taking that data and selling you things even though you don't know about it, et cetera. And we just thought there's a real opportunity and a time to take back control. So what we've been playing with is, which button do I press? This one? Yeah.
Yep.
So by the way, that's a lot of my face. I apologize for that. So in the middle, you'll see key.id/Kirk. So if you go there, you'll see this on your mobile phone. But this is the idea that all of your personal identity information are in your control on your phone and stored only locally with you. And that through that process, you can verify all sorts of different third-party tools. So in this example, we're verifying that my LinkedIn is held by me, my Twitter, my Threads. Everyone's been in the news about Twitter and the blue verification mark. I don't know how much you've been following all of the crazy things that are going on with that service, but essentially there's been a couple of really key things that have happened over the last couple of months. You might have seen there was a Twitter account that was verified, had the blue check mark, and posted a fake photo of the Pentagon being bombing. And the public stock market went down by 25 basis points because of that fake post. So we believe that you should be able to see real verified people and organizations that stand behind the claims that they make. And that's the tool we're building. So, take this to some other use cases as well. I had the pleasure of selling my used Vespa on Kijiji. And I'm not sure how many of you have gone through this process with something of value, but suddenly you're talking to people, through that service, and someone says, I'm interested in buying it for X dollars. And then you got to figure out where are you going to meet that person. They're going to bring you cash. I had to sign over my green slip to this person, and I know absolutely nothing about them other than their username is Kijiji5569. So we think there's a lot of opportunity to bring real verified identity into the world to give you back control and to unlock all sorts of, real opportunities to create more trusted interactions.
So can I ask a couple questions?
Yeah, a lot of buzzwords there.
Yeah, but so I'm gonna throw a buzzword at you
Okay.
as well. So is this just idea? Is this more data too? Like, can I use this for zero? I think of zero knowledge proof when I think this. So if I'm applying for a rent, so for people who don't know what zero knowledge proof is, has anyone here rented a property in the last 2 years? Okay, well, everyone has owned property, richer crowd than I thought in the city. But when you go to rent a property, they ask you for proof of income.
Yes.
And I don't want someone to know if I'm making 100, 200, 300. I just want them to know I'm qualified. So is the idea here that I could use that for here, you verify income? Okay.
Absolutely. And one of the things that you'll see, and it's not in this mock-up, but if you play with key.id/Kirk, you can actually go into each of these claims in the middle, click on them, and you'll see, where we got the information from. And so one of the things that we're experimenting with this is how about we build an integration into your payroll provider, and now one of your claims is what your income is, but you can selectively disclose that to the landlord. And if they're asking you for specifics and you're willing to give them, you can give them specifics. If they're asking you for a range and you want to prove that it's a range, you can do that too. But you should be in control of that.
So I think this sounds really cool. I like to have my universal ID. to a certain extent, you saw like, I think MetaMask or something like that would like to be that.
Yeah.
But, I would say they're not in a position to do it. But who pays for this? Like, who's your customer? Are you solving a problem for Airbnb or me? Do I pay subscription to this? Do you, what have you thought about that so far?
So we like free business models, clearly, based on Wave.
Well, yeah.
Revenue
Advertising?
models. Revenue models come later. But honestly, if you think about this, how much is the landlord paying to verify this information today? Or how much is Airbnb paying every time they need to ID verify somebody? At Wave, we were spending, and Angie's here, she would know, we're spending hundreds of thousands, if not low millions of dollars, using third-party tools to verify our users. So, there's lots of third-party services that will pay for this, and the user should be in control of that.
And I think you touched upon it, decentralized, talking about one of the buzzwords. So I assume the whole idea here is on a blockchain in which you don't own, so you're not a single point of failure. So do you know which blockchains you're using yet, or?
We've actually decided to use a protocol called Carry and keep it off the blockchain.
Okay, interesting.
So that may change over time, but we think this is an amazingly powerful protocol and ensures that no PII data is ever on the blockchain.
Okay, and then one last question before I open up the Q&A from the audience. Is there any action? Can I go right now and sign up, or what's the action you want from the audience and the community?
Look, you're so good. You're so good. So key.id gives you so I will say, by the way, all this was created today so that we could launch with you folks at TechTO. I'm not even...
Jason.
And Preet worked hard today to get the website up. It's a placeholder for now, but you'll get a sense of it. So key.id, and there's a wait list sign up there. Most importantly, one of the things that we'd love to do for the remainder of the evening for anybody who's interested is come up to Peter, Sam, Preet, or I, and just tell us what you think. Is this a good idea, shitty idea? Is there something you'd rather see, not rather see? We're here to get feedback. We're actively in that stage of wanting to hear from folks about what they want to see in this space. So
if you want to do that, don't do it right now. We'll do it after other presentations at the end of the night.
Yes.
But we'll make sure there's time. But before that, let's open right now to Q&A. If you have a question, put up your hand and Jason will roll by. It could be about Key, it could be about Kirk's experience.
Thanks.
Sorry. Is that mic dying on you, Jason?
Hello.
Yeah.
Yeah. I felt a lot of pressure to go back.
So the question was, why did Kirk drop out not once but twice from university?
Yeah, I felt a lot of pressure to go back, and so I went back, and that didn't last very long.
Was it the same type of
No, I tried something else.
So,
It stuck less well than the first time.
okay.
Well, the first one, all I could get into was political science. And then the second one was commerce, but with hospitality. Because that's all I could get into, too.
Okay, so those were the two different things that Kirk tried. Yeah. Next question. Get up and yell it.
Hi there. Thanks for your presentation. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the difference of your service versus a centralized service like Equifax Workforce Solutions and a decentralized one like WellPoint tools for communities.
So the question was, how does Key deferred by centralized services like Equifax, or decentralized services that offer or exist already?
Well, so to be clear, we view Equifax as being, as an example, one of the claims in here, because you'll need your credit score, on several different applications. I think the biggest thing that we view there being two main components of decentralized that are important. One is portability, that you can bring it where you want. Think about quickly the idea of Twitter and Threads. I think a lot of people are excited about, which is kind of crazy, excited about a Mark Zuckerberg Meta project as being the answer. But anyways, there's a lot of people excited about what Threads represents, especially against where Twitter is at right now. But I go over to Threads and I have no portability of any of my contacts or my verification of person, etc. So portability, and then the second is control. And Alex spoke about this with, I want control over who sees my data and what data they see. And I want to be in control of that, not a third party.
Question back there. We'll do two more.
Hi, thanks for sharing this. I'm curious, you mentioned a B2C use case with Kijiji. Have you thought about any enterprise or business use cases that this could be applicable?
So the question here is, we gave an example of a B2C case. What are the B2B cases that you could use this for?
I'd love you to come up and talk to us after and give us some ideas about what you're thinking about. But I think generally, as I think about, it's not necessarily B2B, but for us as a company, we want to go to Wealthsimple and say, why are you putting your users through this much friction to sign up and prove their identity, et cetera? We've got all of this data here. The users have already vetted it. We've got the full transparency on where that data came from. It should be a one-click sign up. And suddenly you're getting products with value immediately.
Last question. I'll go to the front here.
Hi.
So I've been working in the blockchain space for the last 5 years. So I'm really curious to keep this product decentralized and off blockchain. Can you talk a little bit about that?
So the question is, why do you want to keep this centralized and off blockchain?
So do you remember what I mentioned before about hiring really smart people? We hired a really good technical person, and that was the decision he made, and he explained it to me, and most of it went over my head, and I said, you're really smart, I'll just take your answer. But honestly, I think it's something we might get to over time. We just think building on Carry right now is lightweight, allows us to go fast. There's a lot of innovation happening in that space, and we are a little bit concerned around PII on the blockchain, so this was a good, at least first step. Not to say we don't revisit it over time. Okay, great.
Well, can I get a round of applause for Kirk, please?
Sure, Sally. Appreciate it.